When we talk about China in particular and what they are doing around the world, we often start with military power, then we talk about economic power, and those that are really savvy get into the idea of soft power. And you have taken this on in your piece in The Hill at thehill.com, talking about soft power and how communist China is actually using linguistic expansion as a way to influence the Middle East. So first, let's start at the high level in terms of this soft power. What is that? And how is linguistics in the Chinese language becoming part of that strategy for China?
Yes, you are right, Boyd. They have their main focus maybe is in developing triad deterrence event at different levels of military power. But at the same time, they are developing their soft power as well. So a basic definition of soft power is a persuasive approach in international relations involving use of economic or cultural influence. This is what China is doing with this linguistic or cultural programs. So economic influence, everyone knows that. Everyone has heard about it. Debt trap diplomacy, where China pursues nations to get loans from China under very dubious conditions. We see that countries like Pakistan and Iran are in that situation, in debt trap situation, and we see that China is buying cheap oil from Iran and helping Iran to circumvent international sanctions. And then we see that with the UAE, with Saudi Arabia, they promise security and they persuade them to distance themselves from the United States and promise providing security for other Gulf countries. So this is economic influence. When we come to the cultural influence aspect of soft power, we see that the Confucius institutes are very active in the entire Middle East. They are, first of all, we all know that America is a major force behind a lot of noble causes, including America being the main donor of food, the force behind humanitarian causes, funding UN institutions, fighting poverty, fighting diseases. But China, what China is doing, China is depicting America and the West as a force that is undesirable, that is evil, but then creates an image of China as the only non-imperialistic, non-colonialist power that is trying to help the third world develop economically without any expectations. And we all know that this is not true. And this linguistic aspect or this Confucius institutes are doing this job. They are creating a positive image of China all around the world, including in the Middle East. That's how China is working to change minds and souls. While it is committing massacres, genocide inside China, inside, Turkic Uyghur region, Tibet, and the rest of the country, and creating lots of restrictions on Hong Kong and mainland China.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how they're going about this, and we've continued to watch that evolve from China, even into the diplomatic side of things in terms of brokering deals with some of the countries in the Middle East. But I want to dig in just a little further on this whole idea of using language as part of this civilization and cultural influence that not only in Iran but in other places where suddenly Chinese is becoming not just optional but even mandatory in some of the higher education. Give us a sense of the extent of the effort that China is exerting to really make China a language that is becoming more common in the Middle East.
We see that in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Turkey, for example, three major states in the region, we see that, for example, in Iran, while in religious terms they make English haram, forbidden, and they make Chinese language, Mandarin, halal or permissible, and something that they make huge investments, and they started it from the schools. In the near future, we'll witness that they start from the primary schools. So, of course, China is involved in this as well through Confucius Institute and other means. And also, we see that authoritarian regimes, including Iran and some other countries in the Middle East, they prefer that model because that's more compatible with their, let's say, the authoritarian governance model. And we see, for example, they create a China-friendly atmosphere, environment in Iran, and even very ludicrously, some high-ranking clerics claim that having relationship with China, like strategic partnership with China, is in accordance with their faith, with their religion, while China is massacring millions of Muslims in Uyghur region, in East Turkestan, as they call it, Xinjiang. And in Turkey, for example, again, I mentioned in my article, there's this political left-leaning Maoist political party leader who is called Jinping Perinçek because of his ideas, his opinions, because of his pro-China approach that he, as a Turkic person, he supports the massacre of Turkic people in China. So, and he says that that's not happening. What is happening is China is fighting terrorism and extremism, and those terrorists and extremists are funded and financed and supported by the CIA. So this is what's happening when I'm talking about. Of course, no one is opposed to Chinese language and Chinese culture. It has existed from the ancient times, and it's going to exist for the eternity. But what's troubling, what's problematic is the brainwashing of the politicians and the societies under the disguise of cultural and linguistic activities in the Middle East and probably around the world.
Yeah, and it's such an important reminder of why the United States has to continue to lean in to these areas around the world that not only will China continue on economic front, military front, even diplomatic front, but also this soft power space is a space of massive influence. And as you said, whether it's trying to distract people from what's being done to the Uyghurs in terms of religious persecution, whether it's other things that are going on, this is a real tool that China has been using and will continue to use. And Ahmad, we really appreciate you joining us today. A fantastic piece at thehill.com. People should check that out today, and looking at how Communist China's linguistic expansion is sweeping the Middle East as part of this soft power push to create those relationships. And again, it's one more reminder of why the United States cannot withdraw, but need to lean in to those relationships and those interactions. Ahmad, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, boys, for having me.